My God, it's full of stars.
So, for those who are just starting and tuning in tonight is the Low Light Photo Group. This is a group that meets about every other month here online and through Zoom right now. But if you want to find out more about me, you can go to @Foto Dono on either Instagram or Facebook. You can also check me out on fotodono.com. If you'd like to be so kind, because I do these presentations out of my own pocket for stuff, and I do it for, and no one has to, you're more than welcome to drop me a donation on my tip bucket at paypal.me/Fotodono. Some of the stuff that I do is sponsored by Johnson Photo Imaging. It's a store that I work at. I'm the director of education there, so there is some cross coverage on some of this stuff. So if you guys can stop off in Bradenton, or if you want to stop by the store on the website, you're more than welcome. There we go. Now I'm ready to go. All right. Well, guys, thank you all very much for tuning in tonight. I hope you guys are going to enjoy tonight's presentation. Of course, we got our special guest tonight, Mr. David Frere. Thank you, Mr. David Frere. Sometimes you might have seen him on the Facebooks as David Lee. He answers to both. Any questions about any of that stuff before I release the houndstones to Mr. Frere there?
Release the hounds!
You're going to find he's a little bit funnier than me, but his jokes I think are just as bad, though. Just let you know.
They're bad. They're bad.
So David, as I said, he's been lives here in Sarasota, and well, I should say here. He lives around near in the Sarasota area, and in Florida, and David's been chasing lightning for quite some time now, and some of the members of the group have been interested in hearing a little bit more about how to find lightning first of all, and how to photograph it safely. So I contacted Dave, and Dave said he would be more than glad to do this for you. So again, without further ado, I'm going to stop my share and hand it over to Mr. Dave. Dave's not here.
Dave, where's that Dave guy? Somebody get Dave. All right, guys, say. I'm Uncle Snaff has been my nickname. Mr. Donovan would know that. We actually went back to we go as far back as high school. And so he knew me as Uncle. He knew me as Snafu back in those days. That was actually my nickname. But Uncle Snaff is actually my nickname. And that's also been my business name for a very, very long time. Photography wise, I've literally been shooting photography since I was, 8 years old. Am I a highly skilled, educated photographer? No. All right. Have I been doing it for a long time? Yeah, I've been goofing around with it for a long time. I've learned a lot of stuff. All of my friends were professional photographers and or are professional photographers. I have picked up so much stuff from them over the years. It's sick. Am I the world's greatest photographer? Am I the world's greatest lightning photographer? Absolutely not. But I got some tricks and stuff for you, and we're going to teach you guys a bit about lightning. The other thing with the lightning is there's a lot of safety stuff that we're going to go over. And then also, I'm a weather nerd. I served in the Coast Guard for 8 years. I've been through 11 hurricanes, and I don't even know how many tropical storms. And I have just this thing about lightning. I love this stuff. So when I do get the opportunity, I do get out and go chase lightning from time to time. But I am not a storm chaser. I just get out and I shoot lightning, and I'm actually interested in it by itself. So let's go ahead and get started. So let me share this screen here. Let's jump in here and click this one here. And come on, machine, talk to me now. Go talk to me, Goose. All right. So let's get things up and rolling here. All right. So this class here, I actually call it Lightning 101. Really, it's about just the overall setup of shooting lightning. Now, this is actually a pretty long PowerPoint. I've actually shortened it down quite a bit. I'm going to try and condense it down a little bit farther, but I want to get all the important talking points through it. So just bear with me, and I will have sections to ask questions. So feel free to ask questions. And Donovan, if you have to chime in when I do ask the questions, because I can't see my the chat room thing from this screen. So we'll just kind of go from there.
No worries.
So let's go ahead and let's get started here. All right. The very first thing we're going to do is we got to get to know our lightning. All right. And basically, we need to get, ooh, you know something? I didn't even realize this. Hold on here. Let me do a little screen shuffle here. There we go. Get that out of the way and get that out of the way. Now I can see what I've got here. All right. So getting started off. Lightning strikes with either a positive and or a negative polarity. All right. Negative strikes are the most common, but they tend to be the less energetic than a positive strike. All right. And the voltage on a standard, I say a standard candle or a standard negative strike, they usually run about 3 million volts per meter. So literally that's 3 million volts per meter of lightning. You do the math, that's a massive amount of energy that's running through a lightning bolt. The average length of a bolt runs anywhere from about 7 kilometers to 4.3 miles, blah, blah, blah. And however, positive strikes can easily double those numbers. So when we're actually talking about energy, a negative strike tends to be less energetic. A positive strike tends to be more energetic. We'll get into that in just a few minutes. The length of an average lightning can get roughly about 20 miles long and or longer. Now, in 2007 in Oklahoma, there was a recording of the longest bolt at that time, which is 199.5 miles. And excuse me. And Weather Service actually has both satellites as well as ground equipment that they can actually record lightning strikes. So you can actually record a lightning strike and its length and the whole 9 yards and get all that data. They do it in real time all the time. 199 miles. Think about that for just a second, right? The other thing to think about is the temperature of the bolt, and this is critical to photography because a lot of people don't understand in photography, we're actually recording things in temperature. I know it sounds weird. You're taking pictures, but your pictures are actually recordings of temperature, and we measure those units of temperature in Kelvin. So whenever you see your you're looking at your, oh, good Lord. I lost the word all of a sudden. When you're looking at your temperature on your camera, you're actually looking at it in Kelvin. So you might be shooting a particular light at 3,000 degrees Kelvin or at 6,000 degrees Kelvin, depends on the light source. Can't think of the balance, the white balance. Right? Thank you. Oh, good Lord, my brain went dead for a second there. So everything's done in temperature. Now think about this for just a second. The average temperature of a bolt is about 30,000 degrees Kelvin, all right? That's a physical measurement of it, all right? The surface of the sun only runs about 6,000 Kelvin, so you can imagine what we're talking about temperature-wise and what lightning does when you're actually taking a picture of it. What is the longest lightning bolt ever recorded? It actually was very, very recently. It was actually recorded by the GOES 16E satellite. It was actually just a few months ago. It was not very long ago. It was a monster lightning mega flash. It stretched 477 miles across 3 states. And it was a single mega flash, which is just phenomenal to think about it. Have you ever seen lightning go across the sky, horizon to horizon? I have. And when you're looking at a lightning bolt doing that, it's still traveling somewhere around 40 to 50 miles if you're watching it from horizon to horizon. And that depends upon what elevation you're sitting at. So lightning can travel a long ways. How does lightning form? It's very, very simple. Cold air falls, hot air rises. Those molecules rub together to create static electricity, and you're going to get ions in the clouds. So you're going to have positive ions in the top of the cloud. You're going to have negative ions in the bottom of the cloud. Those create a charge, and that charge will build up until eventually the charge can't be held anymore. So it's basically just like a giant capacitor, and it holds the energy until eventually the energy lines itself up and has to be released because there's actually too much energy for the mass of the cloud. This is where lightning comes from, all right? In all essence, a thunderstorm is really nothing more than a giant Van de Graaff generator. Now, if anybody knows what a Van de Graaff generator is, it's basically a giant generator that we have made that creates a high-end electrostatic charge that can be actually discharged into the air. And those things can generate some serious voltage. Well, basically, a giant cloud or thunderhead is nothing more than a Van de Graaff generator. Again, your upper ions are going to be positively charged. Your lower ions are going to be negatively charged. The ground tends to be positively charged, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it is negatively charged as well, all right? Again, we said the 2 types of strikes. One's a negative strike, one is a positive strike, all right? A negative strike is actually easy to decipher. It's a strike that comes from the lower layers of the cloud, all right, which is your negative side, and it discharges to a positive ion, which is usually the ground. But every once in a while, you'll see one travel from the bottom of a cloud to the upper part of a cloud or even the middle of a cloud. But if you look around, that's usually almost always dealt with a charge running to the ground as well. So a lot of times a negative strike needs a cloud to ground as well as in order to have a cloud to air. And that's just the way the electricity runs in it. That's a lot of mechanics involved in trying to make a bolt work. But basically a negative strike is a little bit lesser strike than a positive strike. This is a very common type of positive strike, all right? And again, what you have is your upper atmosphere has the positively charged ions, your lower atmosphere has the negatively charged ions. And a lot of times what we'll have in what we call a cloud to cloud and or a cloud to air, or also known as a bolt out of nowhere or a bolt out of the blue. What happens is that your positive charge ions get to a point where they can't hold anymore. They've got to release that energy. They're looking for a ground. They find the ground in the lower part of the cloud. And then also the lower part of the cloud, if that electricity flows from the upper to the lower, it gets overbuilt with electricity. It has to do a last second discharge. And so you'll get a negative to positive. So you can see this current ground going on. So you have current buildup and then it has to just discharge, and it almost always discharges to the ground. Does have a couple upwards. We'll talk a little bit about that, all right? Different types of bolts. Now, what I was talking about, some of them go upwards. This is called a jet and or a sprite. This is these things up here up in the upper part of your screen, the giant jet, blue jet, and the red sprite. Those are what we call the creme de la creme of photographic pictures. If you can take a picture of a sprite or a jet, you have hit like the most precious thing ever in photographic history. They are so rare to take. There's hardly any pictures of them, especially by a ground photographer. It's rare, it has happened, but these are giant bolts of electric or plasma discharge that goes up into the upper atmosphere and actually discharges into space. So it's actually really incredible. If you ever have the opportunity, look it up on YouTube, look it up on the internet, and look out for blue jets and or red sprites. And there's a ton of information out there, but some really cool stuff on those events. We have the bolt from the blue is actually, photographically speaking, what we're really looking for when we're shooting for lightning. That is the big hoopla of pictures, because there's just so much energy there. You can see it spiders out all over the place. And photographically, that's what a lot of photographers, myself included, are really looking for, are these positive strikes. Negative strikes usually tend to be very, very small in size in comparison when you're dealing with a positive strike, a bolt from the blue, that kind of thing. So they come in a couple different forms. You have zigzags. You have also what's known as a forked bolt, all right? And a lot of times a forked bolt can also be a part of a positive bolt. I'll explain that in a little bit. You also have this phenomenon called ribbon lightning. Ribbon lightning is actually really cool. It's basically a bolt that is in a cloud that is moving relatively fast, but the bolt doesn't discharge all of its energy in the first shot. It discharges its energy and you get the thunder. Well, what thunder is literally where the heat of the lightning has separated the air molecules in between. That air comes back, makes the clap. That's the thunder, all right? That's how that works. Basically, what happens if the air is moving fast enough, the lightning goes down through, but it doesn't discharge completely. It makes a little hole in the air. The air pushes it over a little bit, and then it does it again. And it follows right through that same little hole because that's the path of least resistance. And it creates that one more time. And then it might do it another time. You might get 3 or 4 shots through that little hole that it created in the sky. And I'm going to show you a picture of some ribbon lightning here in a minute. Ribbon lightning is kind of, I don't want to say it's rare. It's not super common, but it is neat to get when you do get it, all right? The last and least, of course, is ball lightning. If you ever have the opportunity to see ball lightning and or beaded lightning, that's actually a really special treat. I've only seen ball lightning one time in my life. That was actually here in Sarasota, right over there off of Myrtle in Booker High School. And I have still yet to see beaded lightning. So beaded lightning and ball lightning are basically plasma that is injected upon itself, and it maintains a shape for some time as it travels through the atmosphere. Cool stuff. All right, so anybody have any basic questions about lightning in general? Anybody? Anybody? All right, let's move on.
No, I got it.
Okay, we got one.
Yes. So then lightning, I don't know, years ago, I heard that lightning actually starts from the ground and then goes up.
Yes, yes. Now, yes, lightning does go from the ground up. It also goes from the cloud down. It actually depends on where the charge is actually built up the most. Sometimes the charge builds up in the ground more and has to discharge into the air. It does require the air to have a little bit of a static energy to it. It also depends on the circumstance. There's a really cool video. It's a super mega cool video of this massive lightning bolt that goes from the ground up and it flares out into this great big giant bolt and it just arcs. It's an incredible video. But what people don't realize, it actually wasn't from the ground specifically. It was actually a transformer plant that blew and built up a charge in the transformer plant, and then literally a bolt of lightning struck and it discharged back upwards into the air. Yes, lightning can go up and it also can go down. It can actually go either or. So it's not just one particular direction. A lot of times it does depend on what the ion masses are doing either in the ground. So if you had like a negative ions in the ground versus normally positive, it could reverse the polarity of the bolt and send it in the other direction. but that's not always 100% the case. Like I said, it does vary. And actually your camera does actually show off sometimes if the bolt is going up or down, because you'll actually see it fork in different directions. Any other questions? No. All right, let's go ahead and move on. One thing we do need to get into is safety, all right? And I'm going to put this detailed information out because it's actually very, very important, especially for those of you who are not from Florida. Myself, I'm from Florida. I've lived here most of my life. I have traveled, but Florida has been my home. We are the lightning capital here in the United States, point blank. We have a lot of iron in our ground. Our ground, because it's made up of quartz and the type of ground that we have, the water table that we have, creates a lot of lightning that actually goes from the sky to the ground. And unfortunately, lightning kills more people here in Florida than any other state, all right? And more people are killed by lightning in Florida than any other weather event. This is including tornadoes, hurricanes, blah, 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 you name it. I myself have witnessed one fatality, it was very unpleasant. And I've actually seen a couple other things. I know a number of people who have lost friends from lightning strikes. Lightning is no joke down here. So the very first thing we have to do is maintain safety when we're dealing with lightning at any point in time. And we'll work on that in just a little bit. Fair weather strikes and lightning out of the blue don't require thunderstorms or rain clouds directly overhead to strike. Again, fair weather strikes, though, they are actually a lot more common. I was actually down in Venice last week. We had a literally puffy little cumulus clouds flopping around, and lightning was blowing all over the place. And there wasn't a thunderstorm to be had. Especially during this time of year, the cloud masses can create, excuse me, they can create a lot of static energy, and you can get lightning out of the blue here. That is very, very common. It's actually a phenomenon known as fair weather lightning strikes, and it is actually very common here. So you do have to be careful when you're dealing with lightning on the fair weather part. Fair weather strikes and lightning out of the blue may travel up to 25 miles before striking. I've actually seen bolts that travel have longer than that. And believe it or not, as much as everybody would like to believe it, there's no such thing as heat lightning. That is really just a myth word. Heat lightning is simply lightning that's too far away to hear. So even though, you know, light travels forever and ever and ever, sound does not. So, you know, if a lightning blast is even as little as 15 miles away, depending on the density of the air, the lightning could actually be muffled out and you'll never hear the thunder from the lightning at all, even from 15 miles away. So just remember, if you can see potential lightning, if you can see lightning, you are still in potential striking range. I don't make that statement to scare people. It's just as a reminder that we have to maintain you know, looking out. If you ever see your hair do this, find cover ASAP, all right? I have to put this disclaimer anytime I do this class. This is a very important disclaimer. Caution should be used anytime you expose yourselves to the hazard of Florida weather, all right? David Freyer, also known as Uncle Snap, I am not telling or advocating for anybody to go out into thunderstorms to perform photography, all right? It's inherently dangerous activity, and you, the photographer, do assume all sole liability 100%. So just make sure that you have been warned. I have to put this disclaimer in anytime I do this. Again, you see this right here. Unfortunately, these kids did not have a great time on the mountaintop when their hair went up like that. This is a video that literally happened just a few weeks ago in Sebring, Florida. This was captured on somebody's actual security cam on their front yard. That is a very serious bolt. That was more than likely a positive strike solely by the energy. I've never seen a negative strike that energetic. But that's a serious bolt of lightning that actually penetrated the ground pretty good. Took out a small bush as well. And like I said, that's a pretty serious. So again, lightning is something not to be messed around with in any way, shape, or form. All right. All right. So let's go ahead and move on from here. Whoops. Okay, here we go. So this is a storm that I was actually checking out. The lightning was off in the distance, so you can kind of see a little bit of lightning there. I was really kind of interested in that. The sun had just gone down, so we had this really nice twilight thing going on. I was kind of working on the light. It was really kind of a cool scenario. But this storm was just moving. It was flat out, probably 40 plus miles an hour. It was actually just hauling. And had my camera out, tripod out, all that kind of good stuff. And out of nowhere, blam! And let me tell you, that was an absolutely massive bolt. And I got the shot. I was all excited. Woo, I got the shot. And then right after that, blam, a second one hit. And it kept on hitting. I did have to quickly pack up the camera and then run for the bridge that was nearby and take cover up in the bridge, because this thing laid down some absolutely serious lightning. And you can tell by the bolt, highly energetic. So it caught me by surprise because I was not paying attention to the actual storm. And that's something I want you guys to be aware of, is that you do have to pay attention to your surroundings when you're dealing with lightning. All right. And again, I've been caught a few times. Me and my brother were out shooting some lightning. And again, you can see that we are under the cloud mass. And matter of fact, not only are we under the cloud mass, but we're under the thing called the beaver's tail. That's probably one of the most dangerous places to be. And again, we were just risking it because the lightning was off in the distance, and we were just having a good time and really not taking it seriously. And out of nowhere, kablamo. That was right there is probably the single most energetic bolt I've ever seen in my life. As a matter of fact, my camera was very dialed down, and it absolutely cooked the image. That is that's actually an edited image. The other image was so white because you just couldn't see anything. So I actually knocked the image quite down just to see what it was that hit. And I mean, it was not very far away. We're literally like 2 football fields away. Huge bolt, tons of energy, massive amount of light. Again, this is what happens when you're not paying attention and you're not watching your safety. We quickly moved on. All right. Same kind of thing. This is yet another one. All right. Still too close. This is less than a football field away. Lightning is literally just a few hundred yards over that direction. I was actually shooting lightning off in the distance. I thought I was out of the way, and I was not out of the way. And it snuck up on me really quick. So again, you know, safety is absolutely primary in this. Just remember this: when you're holding a camera, or you have a camera on a tripod, I should say, your tripod is grounded. Your camera is full of gold and electronics and stuff that attracts electricity. And so basically you're standing next to a lightning rod. And if you're like me, you're holding on to a wire remote on top of it. That makes things, let's just say, bad. Really what you want to do is you want to find a safe place. And when I do go out shooting lightning and I'm actually paying attention, I am actually looking for a safe place. Bridges are a great safe place. One of the reasons is this little thing right here. This is called a Faraday cage. Faraday cage basically takes the electrical shock and moves it around you. Literally what a bridge does, same exact kind of thing. If you take a look here, you got all this stuff on top of the bridge. If you're underneath the bridge area or even nearby the bridge, as long as you're not next to one of the piles, you're actually a little bit safer, because the tendency of the lightning would be to go to the highest structure and also the easiest electrical charge, if you get what I'm saying. So literally using cover like that, bridge, building, even believe it or not, power lines work well as long as you're not near the pole. The whole concept is that you're putting something up over your head that the lightning would actually go to and actually dissipate the charge before it enters you and or your camera. All right. So really the principle of a Faraday cage does work, and that's one of the safety devices we use when we're actually shooting lightning to make things a little bit better. There's nothing in the world saying that you have to use those things. Though, if you want to go and stand out on a beach in a thunderstorm, knock your socks off, you will not see me there with you. I've seen what lightning can do. It's not fun. When we're dealing with the actual storm itself, all right, really what we want to do is we want to be a little bit farther off from the storm. And what we'd like to do is actually flank the storm. So here's the elements of the storm. You got the mattermost cloud. This is also known as the anvil of the cloud. This is the top part of the thunderstorm. This is your rising and falling column here. And then you have what they call the outflow. This is the beaver's tail off of the storm. These are the structures right here that actually where you're going to see a lot of your positive strikes. And this is what's actually more photogenically available for you picture-wise. This is actually something that's got more interest than just the bolt itself. So whenever I'm working on storms, I'm really not trying to get up close to the storm. I actually want the storm to be a few miles off so I can actually take a look at the full storm. And I try to get to a position where I'm actually flanking its movement instead of sitting in the line of its movement and or even underneath the storm. All right. What I mean by that is this. All right. You can see here on this radar image where flanking the storm would actually be, hopefully you guys can see my mouse here, but literally to flank the storm would mean you'd be over this direction and you'd have the storm moving across and actually blowing away from you. So this way you get the cleanest air of the weather event. That way you can actually see more lightning and you can actually see the rise and fall columns of air in the thunderstorm itself. So this is really what we call flanking a storm, and that's really what you want to try and do. Radar applications are wonderful. There's a ton of them. I'm not going to really say any particular radar app on your phone like My Radar or anything is perfect. It's actually a really good app. So if you have a radar app on your phone, feel free to use it. You can actually position yourself, watch where the storms are, and actually kind of see what's going on. It's a great app to use that you can actually learn to flank a storm versus actually standing where it's coming at you. Different types of clouds. And this is one of the things I was talking about, the fair weather lightning strike. You get these cumulus clouds. These are those nice puffy little clouds that have the nice rising center. They're basically a baby thunderstorm is the best way to explain them. Cumulus cloud in mass will actually grow into a cumulonimbus if you have enough moisture rising air and enough heat. That's actually what a cumulus cloud does. It grows into a cumulonimbus, all right? And so that's basically what I like to call baby thunderstorms. They create lightning just as much as the big old thunderheads and the cumulonimbus storms. That's what creates the fair weather lightning. There is another type of cloud that creates lightning that's equally as dangerous as anything else. This is called the nimbostratus. Now, for those of you who are from New York, New Jersey, anywhere along the northern area, you'll see a lot of storms where you'll have, just everything's gray and then lightning kind of flops out. That's usually from a nimbostratus cloud system. And usually that's from a weather system. So it's usually a larger mass system. And it's not going to be like the cells that we get down here in Florida. So yes, you can still shoot lightning in those types of events. No problem whatsoever. Understand that you're not going to have as much definition. And also you're going to be really trying to shoot more of the lightning than you are the clouds, because pretty much in those kind of cloud masses, everything is just gray. You don't have any definition to shoot from. But again, a lot of really cool building lightning shots, like in New York City off the Empire State and other large buildings there, usually are in a storm that's involving nimbostratus clouds. So that's kind of the type of clouds that you're going to see. The rest of these clouds don't produce lightning. They're all what they call dry clouds, and they don't really have too much of a static charge and or even that much moisture in them. It's mostly ice particles. All right. Anybody have any basic questions on clouds, weather, that kind of thing?
No, but great discussion.
Okay. Oh, good. Good. Now, again, we're in Florida here. All right. So our weather system is a lot different than what you might find even as much as the central part of the states. I spent about 15 years up in North Carolina. During the summertime in the mountains of North Carolina, we get these absolutely harsh gully washer thunderstorms that come in, and they're great. So if you get the chance, you're on the top of a mountain, you got a protected area, even sitting inside your car, because a car is a great place. You got a Faraday cage literally wrapped around you. You can shoot from your car. All right, set your tripod up and actually set right there in your car, and you can actually shoot from your car. So again, that's a Faraday cage, and areas like that get those storms. In this wintertime, they actually get those, the Nimbus stratus clouds that I was talking about actually are snowstorms. And the snowstorms produce lightning. The very first time I ever sat in a snowstorm that was just blowing lightning all left and right, I lived on top of a mountain, and I was just dumbfounded at how much lightning was blasting all over us. I'm like, it's a snowstorm. Why is there lightning? Doesn't matter if it's cold or if it's hot. If you have wet particles of any type, whether they're ice particles or water particles, they're moving fast by each other. They're going to create friction inside the cloud. That will create a static charge. So doesn't matter, snow, rain, whatnot, as long as you have those conditions, you're going to have lightning. Any other questions?
Yeah, Dave, I was
Yes, sir.
wondering, did you ever, did you ever, let me try this again. When you're talking about cars, does it matter what type of car it is? I mean, if you've got a sunroof type of thing, or if you got like,
If you drive like a Corvette and you're in a fiberglass car, you're probably not going to be as happy because you don't have the Faraday cage around you, if that makes sense.
okay.
It's kind of funny. Cars are not infallible to lightning. I had a Volkswagen Bug back when we were in high school that got struck by lightning and did a lot of damage to the car. But do cars get hit all the time by lightning? No. And we would be living proof down here. Everybody's car down here would have damage of some sort if lightning struck every single car out here. So even if it does strike a car, a lot of times the bolt tends to go to, or let me rephrase this, the electricity tends to go to the outer part of the metal, not the inner part of the metal. It goes around and then into the ground. And so cars tend really not to be all that conductive to lightning because they're isolated because of their tires sitting up off of the ground and having an insulator that they're sitting on. And so they just don't tend to get hit all the time. Is it impossible? No, cars do get hit. It's just not really common, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, well, let's go ahead and move on. If you guys do have any other questions, feel free. We got tons of space to ask the questions. I love this picture here because it's just funny. I have no idea why anybody needs to get in that kind of a position, but hey, knock your socks off. This whole section here is going to be on the cameras and the tools and that kind of thing. We're not going to spend a great deal of time, but we are going to talk about it. Lenses. Everybody asks me all the time, oh, what's your favorite, most incredible lens? And I got to know your lens secret and blah, 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 and lens this and equipment that. And honestly speaking, I started shooting lightning eons ago with my film camera. I actually had an old Minolta X7A that I shot lightning with. I actually learned how to shoot lightning from a guy who took a very famous picture. And I met him in a bar one night up in Fort Walton Beach. And we were talking about photography. And he told me, oh, yeah, I took this picture, which happened to be he was the guy that I ended up losing a contest to in a magazine eons ago. It's kind of a funny story, but he took this great picture of a lightning bolt next to a tornado down in Kissimmee. It was a very famous picture and that kind of thing. I asked him what he was using for equipment, and basically he whipped out his camera, which looked almost identical to my camera, with this teeny tiny little lens. And I went, but that's a great picture. And he says, you don't need a big, massive lens to take a picture. He said, it just needs to be a good lens. That's all. So do you need to have all this super fancy, mega, super expensive equipment? I say absolutely not. This is literally my lens that I'm using for lightning. Now, there's a reason why I use this lens. I even call it Dobbs approved, all right? But basically, it's just a Canon. I'm shooting Canon, all right? So it doesn't matter. Brand doesn't really matter in this particular case because Nikon, Sony, they all make the same kind of stuff. This is an EFS lens. This is a basic user kind of lens. It's not a kit lens. It's the next step above, all right? But it's what's known as a super zoom, all right? So it's an 18 millimeter by 135 millimeter. Now, super zooms, a lot of times people use those when they're traveling from place to place, and that kind of thing. For lightning, this lens has really been the bomb because I don't have to run around changing lenses. I don't have to do any of that. I can set up my shot however I want. If I want to go wide and take a nice big wide shot, I can take a nice big wide shot. If I want to get in there because the storm's actually far away, or maybe the hot spot of the storm where a lot of the lightning is farther away, I can zoom in and shoot. I can kind of do whatever I want to do. It's got just a decent enough f-stops. So the f-stop on this is 3.5 to give me what I need for dark light, for low light shooting. I actually don't use a stabilizer on it. I actually turn the stabilizer off, but I can go into manual focus, which is something I do need. We'll talk about that again here in a short bit. And again, just simple equipment. You don't have to go crazy, stupid, expensive, big, giant, long lenses. Usually a nice super, or what they call a nice super zoom lens, an all-purpose lens, is great because it allows you to be able to go wide if you need to, or get in tighter if you need to do that as well. The other reason why I like using this particular lens is I can pull my focus tack sharp. And I mean that because years ago, before I started using this lens, I was using a lot of wide format lenses. So I had a couple, like a 10x23 lens from Tamron. I had another Canon lens, which was a 35x50. I had all these kind of different format lenses. My problem was they were so wide, I could not pull a tight enough focus. When you're using a super zoom lens, you can zoom the lens into the farthest object that you can see. You can pull a super nice, sharp tack focus and then pull it back out, and it's going to be razor sharp. And you're going to see some pictures here in a short bit that explains the difference with that. All right, so I'm going to show you some of this. The other thing is too, is you got intervalometers and all kinds of other little
Dave.
toys and tools. Yes, sir.
Dave. Hey, Daryl wanted to know about how long will you leave the shutter open when taking pictures of lightning? I'm assuming
I am going to get
into that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually coming up next. So, oops, let me reset here. The actual settings and everything we're actually going to get into. I'm just kind of going over the equipment, and then we're going to rush right into the settings and that. When it comes to intervalometers and all these other fancy pieces of equipment, I'd be very honest with you. If you like playing with fancy toys, knock your socks off, but you really don't need it. All right. You can even get strike finders. I actually have a lightning bug. I love my lightning bug. It's really cool. It's limited on what I can do. I can actually shoot more using a long exposure kind of format. The one piece of kit that I absolutely live for is a simple wired remote. Nothing fancy, doesn't have to be a big fancy intervalometer or any of that, but the wired remote versus a like the Wi-Fi or wireless type remote, that's the big difference right there. Wired remotes, they don't break. They also don't lose signal. They're not interfered by lightning, and literally it's just a very simple wire connection. You plug it in and you have it, it's at the ready. It always works. You never have to go through any kind of process with it. The other thing is too, is you can actually lock your shutter, and you never have to worry about your shutter unlocking because you lost signal or a lightning flash interfered with it or anything like that. So really a wired remote in my book is still the best way to go. All right. You don't even have to use a wired remote. You can actually just set the timer on your camera. Here's the reason why you would also want to do that. Now, I'm going to give you a quick ancient secret ninja photographic technique. I learned this from ancient secret ninjas a long time ago. All right. Here's what you do. Instead of having to use an intervalometer and all that kind of stuff, you're going to set your camera up to continuous shooting. So doesn't matter fast, slow. I usually set mine at slow continuous, but just as long as it's continuous shooting. All right. And time-wise, your exposure time depends on the storm. It depends on your lighting. You do have to kind of figure these out. But a lot of times I am dealing in seconds. And a lot of times if I'm shooting at nighttime especially, I will do a longer exposure. So my exposure could run anywhere from 5 seconds to as long as 30 seconds and longer, depending on what I want to shoot. On average, I usually tend to shoot anywhere between 10 to 30 seconds. And again, it depends on the storm. My ISO is also going to be set at 100. So we're going to get into that in just a second. But by simply doing that, if you go ahead and lock that trigger up, all right, every time the picture is done with that 15 seconds or that 20 seconds or that 30-second exposure, it's going to just click the next shot. Then it's going to click the next shot. Get what I'm saying? So you can actually not miss anything just by locking up your shutter, and literally it's going to keep on firing, and that way you're not going to miss any lightning. The one thing I have learned over the years is every time I unclick my shutter to take a look, see what I've got, the nice, biggest and brightest and prettiest bolt of lightning always strikes in between my shutter being opened and or closed. And let me tell you, you want to talk about frustration. Lightning is one of those things that will frustrate you to no end, but that wired remote does everything. This is ribbon lightning, all right? And like I said, I was going to show you ribbon lightning now. The picture here to the left is crappy. It's absolutely horrible. That was shot with a lens that was really kind of going bad. And again, it was such a wide format that I couldn't even get a decent enough focus. I got the clouds in focus, but the lightning was inside of it, and unfortunately I couldn't get it. But that's what ribbon lightning actually does. It actually follows itself as it's moving. The one to the right, this was shot with the other lens, and this actually got me my nice sharp tack focus, and I was actually able to zoom into the cloud, into the hot spot, and I was actually able to get the lightning a lot better because I was actually into the hot spot of the cloud versus just taking a giant massive picture around. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense, but I like to show off what ribbon lightning actually is. I have just a couple shots of ribbon lightning, but you can see where it kind of almost mimics itself, and that's where it gets the term ribbon lightning. The next piece of kit that is actually really important, you do need a tripod. If you're doing long exposure photography, and a lot of times this is a low light photography class or a low light photography group, and because of that, you guys are familiar with the idea that you need to have a good tripod. The tripods here on the left, these are video style tripods. They really are not as solid as what you might find as a tripod on the right. The one thing I do have to say when shooting lightning that you might be dealing with wind. And so when you do set up your tripod, you want to avoid putting your top tube and extending it up. Leave your top tube down. This keeps the amount of wiggle out of the image. And believe it or not, just a very slight breeze can produce enough wiggle with your camera to actually make your image to go a little bit on the fuzzy side if you're doing a long exposure item. And I've actually had some stars as well as some other things that have wiggled around simply because of the wind. And again, if you're out in the storm areas, you're going to have wind. So even a wind as low as 10 miles an hour can actually cause your tripod to wiggle some. So I do always say, invest in a decent tripod. Make sure it's a thick enough tripod that it's not going to wiggle around, and don't put the top tube up. All right, here's the big tricks. We're going to get into the actual camera parts now. First thing we need to do is we need to find our focus. Now, when I talk about your focus and the different types of lenses, this was shot with a older lens that I just could not get the focus right, and you can see it in the image. One bolt is actually a little bit more in focus. The other bolt was not as in focus. That was solely 100% the lens. And then on top of it, I overcooked the image on top of it. So this is one of the reasons why it's so important to have a somewhat decent lens. And again, just a good super zoom lens works perfectly. Let's find our focus, all right? This is what's known as a sky crawler. Everybody loves big sky crawlers, and this is a big one. This one was cruising, this went very, very far across the sky. You're looking at a very big area. I was actually zoomed all the way out. So I'm at a 18 millimeter, so I'm shooting wide. This is actually out in the celery fields out in Sarasota. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner is Mount Sarasota, all right? And you'll see the radar tower to the radar. You'll see the antenna towers running down in the lower left-hand portions of the screen, all right? Got the lightning nice, sharp tack, and the reason is how I pulled my focus. I don't have anything in the sky that I can actually get a uh, what we call infinitive zoom, or infinitive focus. All right. If you just turned your focus ring to infinity and think that that's going to pull you in infinitive focus, I really hate to tell you, but unfortunately, the lens, there isn't any lenses I've ever seen. I've got some very expensive lenses. None of them pull infinitive focus just by looking at the marker on the lens and working that way. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. You really need to pull the focus. So we're going to learn how to do that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to set our cameras on manual focus. We're not going to use the autofocus. So flip your camera lens onto manual. All right. That should automatically take your camera and put it into manual settings. Basically, what we're looking at is we're trying to find a nice faraway object, and we need to find a good faraway object. Well, fortunately, I do have some good faraway objects. So I've got a couple towers. Now, one's a little bit closer by, so I'm not going to get a great infinitive focus with it, but I could get a far focus. But I've got some other towers that are actually farther away that would actually pull a better, more infinitive type of focus. And so I've got one in particular that's much farther away, but is still very visible. And because of that, that's actually the better tower to use. All right. So let's take a look at this picture here, and you'll see way off in the distance, you'll see even yet another tower, which is even bigger. And unfortunately, that one's so far away that the air molecules are literally making it too hard to pull the focus. But the other tower is still just close enough to where I can actually pull a very tight focus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in as far as I can with my lens to pull the focus. And I'll go ahead and try and get a decent focus with that. Then, literally using the rear screen on my camera, if everybody takes a look at your camera, you're going to see a little plus button. And if you hit that plus button while your camera is in rear screen, that will actually zoom the rear screen in. If you're using a Canon, you can zoom in up to times 10. I think Nikon has the exact same feature. I apologize. I do not know about Sony. My apologies. I'm not trying to do any brand shaming or anything like that. I just never used a Sony, so I have no idea. Some of the other brands, though, they still, most of them have that little plus thing on it, and or a little magnifying glass. And when you're in your rear screen, you can actually zoom in and even pull your focus a little bit tighter. All right, so you can actually get that focus in nice and tight. Once you get that focus in nice and tight, then all you have to do is simply back your zoom up, and your camera will stay in focus to what's considered a infinitive zoom. All right. And you don't just have to use a tower. You can actually use stars if you have stars in the background, or you have star sky, or anything in the far distance that you can pull. The farther away the object that you can pull the focus off, the better. That's what's going to get you the infinitive shot. All right.
Hey,
so
Dave.
again, yes, sir.
Hey, Dave. Sorry. Just also let people know too. A lot of the newer cameras, especially the mirrorless systems, have what they call focus peaking, and they also have focus magnification too. That could also help them out as well
Yeah.
as looking at the magnifier, the plus magnifier, and the index version.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, I'm actually getting a little bit behind the times because I am using a slightly older camera, and so I don't have those fancy features on it. But there are, like you said, I have seen a couple that had these advanced focus pulls where you can actually zoom the focus in even farther. And read up on your equipment. If you need to, get on down to JPI, and actually they can show you how to use those features. But being able to zoom in as much as you can to pull your focus will really sharpen up your focus and get you a much more tack sharp focus. All right.
All right. And Margaret says, how do you set focus when at the beach? Use the stars, right?
A lot of times I'll use the stars if the stars are available. If the stars are not available, 99.99 every beach I've ever been on, with the exception of Cape San Blas out in the Panhandle, has resorts on them. So literally, I will find the farthest resort away from me, and I will literally turn my camera and pull the farthest focus off of the farthest object I can find down the horizon. So literally, I'll just try to find the farthest object down the beach, and focus off that if I don't have any stars. If I have stars, of course, stars are absolutely the perfect item to use for infinitive focus, because if you're going to talk about infinity, go to a star. I mean, those are billions of light years away, and billions and billions and billions of stars to use.
Hey,
so again,
I got one more thing for you. Glidden said, pull focus to infinity and beyond.
infinity and beyond. That's exactly it.
Hey, that was private. Come on.
I was actually thinking about that joke, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. But thank you very much, Glidden. All right. So just to recap with pulling our focus, the very first thing we want to do is we want to zoom in all the way with our lens. All right. And then we want to use our rear screen to zoom in even more so we can actually pull our focus, make sure we're in manual with our lens and not using autofocus. Now, the other critical part is if your lens is in manual focus, you can shoot a picture at any time. But if your lens is in autofocus and you try to shoot a picture, then your camera has to think about where focus is, and you will lose not only your focus, but it takes forever to get the shot. So using an autofocus in this kind of setting, and really any kind of low light picture setting, autofocus is really not the way to go. You really need to learn how to do a manual focus pull in low light. That's actually the best way to get the most accurate focus. And I mean with any kind of thing. It doesn't have to be with lightning. It could be any object. Learning the manual focus pull is actually a critical technique for any photographer out there. Again, if you need a tutorial on it, there are tutorials online, but just go see Donovan down there at JPI. He's more than happy to show you and help you out and that kind of thing. The other thing too is if you do want to really stick with the autofocusing, you can use the back button feature, but again, that can get a little bit tricky. Then you got to play with the turning the lens back off of auto, back into manual, and it's just too many fingers in the pot, too much chance to lose your focus. Again, just by learning how to do it manually is the best thing. And really, you need to practice. Before you get out there to go do any kind of shooting, practice pulling your focuses. Go out at nighttime, take a look at the stars and try and pull a focus, with your camera on a tripod, and just try to get a nice focus with the stars. The more you practice, the quicker and easier it is when you're actually in the field trying to shoot. If that makes any kind of sense there. And remember I was talking about with lightning always has to have a ground. Remember that great big giant beautiful cloud burst of a storm, that one right there that we were talking about. All right. Now, when I talk about energy and all that kind of stuff, all that kind of lightning got triggered by this little guy right here. All right. That is actually the trigger for that whole big lightning sequence. And I did find it in the picture. And like I said, all lightning will go to a ground at some point, way, shape, or form. You just might not see it. But I guarantee you, all lightning is going to a ground of some sort. Lightning does not really travel from cloud to cloud by itself. It does need what's known as a trigger action in order for the lightning to actually jump. All right. So I always say, hey, would y'all look at that? All right. I like to go through my pictures and take a nice tight look and see what's going on. I mean, lightning's fascinating to me. So, look at these little things. Again, like I said, in some situations, if you're properly flanking a storm, you have the storm is flanking to your left or to your right. At some point in time, you should have some open sky and stars and stuff like that you can actually shoot. If you're far away from the storm, you can actually see some stars and sky and that kind of thing in order to pull it infinitive focus. Oops, let me go the right direction here. All right, here we go. All right, so here you go. I was actually shooting stars and I had no idea there was a thunderhead out there, and I wasn't trying to shoot for a thunderhead, and all of a sudden it started lightning on me, and I was like, oh, look at that. And I was actually interested in the stars because I was actually trying to get some background stars for another image altogether. And then the lightning happened and screwed up my whole star shot. But it did kind of teach me a couple of different things. Again, the importance of using stars to pull the focus, but also when you're doing a low light photography type of shot or long exposure shot, you're going to have the ability to shoot lightning. So let's get into some of the settings in it. Like I always said, my God, it's full of stars. All right. Actually, just watch that movie. Great movie. All right. The settings on our camera, the ISO or ISO, depending on what school that you come from. All right. But the ISO on your camera really needs to be roughly about 100, 200. Do you need to go above 200 for your ISO? Really, no. The reason is that your sensor on your camera absorbs light at a very particular rate. If you speed that rate up too much, you're going to end up washing out your image. You're going to get too much light into the camera, and it's basically going to create too much noise, and it's also going to create basically too much light. We want to actually knock that ambient light out. We're going to bring our ISO down to 100 to 200. Also, the way a chip captures light, the lower the ISO, the more chance that you have of the light actually absorbing. And again, because you're dealing with lightning, it's super mega bright, so it's going to imprint itself onto the chip, even if you have your f-stop set really high. All right, it's just the nature of the beast. If you're back to the old film days when you used to do this, I've done this with film. Problem with film is that this was just really expensive because you could eat up a lot of film in a very short period of time. But again, even in film, I always stuck to a speed of 100 for my film. So again, always, I really never go above 100. Very rarely do I get to the 200 range. And again, it depends on the storm. If the storm is slightly farther away, the lightning is not as bright, then you could go to an ISO of 200. But if it's much closer up, you really want to stay in ISO 100. All right. Oops. Got to go the right direction. Got to learn the right direction. There we go. For our exposure, the toughest part with lightning and the most frustrating part with lightning is the f-stop exposure. All right. No two bolts have what they call a standard candle. You cannot go from one storm to the next storm. And honestly speaking, you could actually be looking in like in a picture like this. I'm out at the beach. All right. And I could have a storm off in the distance. I could have this storm right here in front of me. And believe it or not, two separate bolts of lightning from two different storms are going to have two levels of light. And one's going to be brighter, one's going to be dimmer. So no one f-stop is going to be the same exposure for all bolts of lightning. So I can't say this is the f-stop that you should use. A lot of times what I do is this, is I'm going to waste a few shots. So what I will do is I will try to capture one or two bolts, see where it is, actually go onto the camera, look in the back screen, and actually see if I've overcooked the shot. If the shot was overcooked, then what I'll do is I'll bring my f-stop up by quite a bit. Now, here's the whole trick. Let's just say you are shooting at an f-stop of 11, all right? And that has been, looks like it's relatively comfortable for you. You've taken a look in your back screen. You've actually kind of seen, okay, it's not too overexposed. I always say, take your f-stop and go at least one number higher. So the 11, your next stop would be normal. Most cameras a 13. All right. You could even take it up to one more step, maybe, 15. The whole concept here is that if you underexpose lightning, you actually will see a little bit more details. Because the temperature of lightning is so hot, it will imprint on your sensor. So you can actually underexpose lightning and actually still come up with a really cool shot. Most of my more tack sharp and less washed out shots, and I have less hot spots, are all for me underexposing than it is from overexposing. So using that f-stop is actually going to adjust for our exposure. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in some other shots here. Oops, here I go, wrong direction again. Just call me wrong way, Willie. All right. Again, older lens, just could not get the focus set right on it. And I use these as definitely images to show off what happens when you overcook an image. These have even been processed, and I did as much as I could to really get the image to, work out. And it's just, I overcooked the image. How do I know I overcooked the image? Well, you can see that you get this reddish purple aura that happens around the lightning. Now, some people are like, oh, that's really cool shot, blah, blah, blah. And I absolutely hate it because this giant aura around it, I've lost so much detail in the lightning because I let the lightning get overcooked. I could have taken my f-stop and actually gone up higher. This is a case where I was shooting a not so bright lightning earlier, and then I get this one positive bolt that comes through. That's exactly what you're looking at, or a pair of positive bolts, all right? And literally, because my f-stop was set slightly too low, I ended up overcooking the shot. So if I remember right, with this one right here, I was somewhere around like a f-stop, was it 8.5 or something like that? I forget what the f-stop, but it's in that range, 7.5. And it really could have been like 9 to 11, maybe even as much as 13. Would have been much better, and I would have gotten a really nice, sharp, tight image with the lightning. I don't remember what the image on this was, but again, you can see the hot spot here. You can see that the whole bolt is just way too hot. It actually, I can't get rid of that red aura. I've tried editing out. I could manually go in there and edit, but it's just not worth it. To be very honest with you, I'd much rather shoot the lightning right instead of going there and try and re-edit everything. That's just ridiculous. Once you overcook lightning, that's it. It's game over. So I always say try to err on the side of underexposure, and you will actually have much better results. All right. Again, same kind of thing. You get that one bolt that's that nice big giant, really cool looking, positive bolt, and you overcook it because your f-stops were just too low. You need to bring your f-stop up at least 1 to 2 points, at least, if you think that you got it. Underexposing is actually the way to go with lightning. And again, a lot of times, because it does surprise you, this is a much better example of a better or even a more underexposed lightning. Both of these bolts were underexposed. I did have some fun with the color on it. I just wanted to kind of give it a little bit more dramatic purpley blue. But in all essence, the whole goal here was to get rid of the hot spots. Now, this one here on the left-hand side, you still have a little bit of hot spots here. And you'll notice the base of the bolt gets much brighter as well. That's not because there's more energy, although this part has been slightly debated on the energy level, because you're going from a positive ion out through the cloud or out through the air, and then you hit a negatively charged cloud and then back into the positive ground. They think that that might be a little bit more energy, but really that has to do with more water vapor. The more water vapor you have around a lightning bolt, the more of this aura that you get, and that aura really washes out the bolt. So you're actually losing a lot of imagery. So when you knock your f-stop back and you actually make it darker and underexpose it, you're actually also helping to knock out some of that water vapor that's actually overcooking your shot as well. And believe it or not, your water vapor does actually overcook it. That's why when lightning leaves the cloud, you get this bright spot. That's not because it's like super energized. It's just the water vapor dissipates the light, creates this big white spot. It's just like a flash with a big diffuser on it. That's really all that's happening. So that's why you get these bright spots in your lightning imagery, and that just has to do with water vapor. The lower you get the exposure, the less that you get those hot spots. Same thing here, I was able to knock that down. And again, it's in and out of the cloud, it's in and out of the vapor, and you can kind of see still slightly water vapored here, but still much better shot. And you can actually see these little blue trails right here. That's actually called feelers. That's actually little bits of electricity that's going out, trying to feel out where the best ground is. Because that's really all lightning's doing, is just trying to find the best ground. And it does it at light speed. Yes, sir.
Hey, Dave. Yeah, the question came up, says, what program are you using to edit?
I do use Lightroom to do my editing for my lightning. I also have used Photoshop, Lightroom, both do pretty much the same thing. Of course, you can do a lot more with Photoshop. I, believe it or not, I'm not a big Photoshopper. I just don't use the program very well. I'm not a big Photoshop person. So most of the time I'm using Lightroom, and that does enough adjustments that I can manipulate it the way I want. I try not to get too heavy with the editing, although I will play with the color some because I am creating art. This isn't just lightning because, oh my God, I'm trying to create some level of art for myself that I like to see. So your program is completely up to you, but I have been using Lightroom over the years. And I think Aurora also has a very intuitive, I've got Aurora as well, but I don't use that one as much, but that has a wonderfully intuitive interface to be able to do some really cool edits as well. So you can control a lot nowadays. One of the cool parts with doing your editing is literally having the ability, if you're, what's the word I'm looking for? If you're underexposing your image, you can actually bring your image exposure up in your editing and actually see more of the bolt. You can actually increase your white light, you can decrease your dark light, you can actually play with it and adjust so you can actually see the bolt better, and you can also give the clouds a little bit more definition. All right. So actually speaking, this is the editing software does help you out because it allows you to actually see more of the bolt. And this is what I was talking about with the fingers. That's that same bolt of lightning, but you can see the little itty bitty fingers. I actually sent a number of these images to the University of Florida, and they actually are fascinated with the fingers. And apparently not a lot of photographers get these fingers because they're overexposing their lightning. And this guy was actually really interested in my technique, and I was telling him how I underexpose, and apparently that's what they're using now in their lightning research to be able to see more detail in the lightning. So I try to keep in touch with these guys from time to time. Unfortunately, the last 2 years, the lightning has been so bad, I haven't even bothered going out. But I do keep very good track on my lightning, and I'm watching it all the time. And anytime I get the opportunity to get out, I get out there and go shoot. The exposure time for the subject matter has to do with how much ambient light you have going on. All right. You could have the moon out, that could be creating a lot of ambient light. You could be shooting in a cityscape, or you could be shooting out at the beach, or you could be in a desert somewhere. How much ambient light really matters on what's your exposure time for the subject. I'm creating art when I do this, so I want to see the clouds, I want to see the buildings. If I'm in a cityscape, I want to see the landscape. I don't want to see just a bolt of lightning. I'm trying to make my imagery a little bit more interesting by using all these different elements. So my exposure time basically helps me develop whether or not I'm going to see the stuff in the foreground or in the background or the cloud masses. And so a lot of times I will tend, in darker areas, my exposure time will be much longer. Half a minute to a minute to as much as 2 minutes. I've shot shots 3-4 minutes just to see if I can do it and experiment with the really dark light. So your exposure time is basically set up as to what you need. And there's actually a little saying, you expose for your background and you shoot for your foreground. So literally in this case, you're literally exposing for the stuff in their background. So the darker the area, make your exposure time longer. The lighter the area, you can actually lessen up on your exposure time. But you can also play with this. This was like a 10-second exposure because it was actually very lit. I was literally standing on top of the Ringling Causeway doing this shot. You're actually overlooking Bird Key. The storm is actually over Siesta Key. So you can kind of see what I was doing, but I had so much ambient light. 10 seconds was it. If not, I was really getting, pretty bright in the imagery. This right here, this was 30 seconds. Now, this was 30 seconds, and believe it or not, out at the celery fields, looking out here at Mount Sarasota, there's actually a lot of ambient light there. So 30 seconds lights that hill up like I was shooting in the late afternoon or early evening kind of thing. And believe it or not, it was pitch black out there. When I talk about the length of a bolt and a positive strike, this is actually my go-to image. People have no concept of how long lightning can travel, but let me put this to you this way. I literally was tracking the storm using a radar on my device, all right? The storm itself was physically to the center of Arcadia, which is roughly about 60 miles away. The lightning bolt fired. I was actually able to see because the lightning was really slow. There wasn't a lot of energy going on. I knew the hot spot, so my camera was kind of more zoomed in towards the hot spot of where the lightning was coming from. When this shot happened, the lightning bolt was actually halfway in between Sarasota and Arcadia. So literally you're looking at a lightning bolt that was roughly about 30 miles long when it came down and touched down. It recorded in between Sarasota and Arcadia, and you can see from the shot, you're actually looking at the upper part of the cloud mass that's in Arcadia. So like I said, pretty long distance shot. Now it looks like it's hitting Mount Sarasota, but the real reality is actually in between Arcadia and Sarasota. So that kind of gives you an idea of distance and electricity and how far a lightning bolt can travel. That was a massive bolt. And I didn't hear a thing. Like I said, it's so far away, I never heard it. There was no thunder or clap or anything like that because it's just too far away. The thunder literally can't travel that far. It dissipates in the atmosphere. Again, just playing with the time. I was actually showing a friend of mine long exposure techniques, and we were actually kind of going over long exposure techniques. I was not shooting lightning that night. I had no idea a thunderstorm was offshore. There was no lightning at the time. We were just shooting the bridge. We were shooting, actually, I'm sitting over here by the Purple Cow or the Van Wezel. For any of you guys in Sarasota that understand the location, I'm overshooting the bay. You're looking out at Bird Key and St. Armand Circle in that area. And so I was literally just kind of showing how long exposures and different f-stops and that kind of thing work, and a bolt of lightning fired off. Now you can see my settings. My f-stop was at 22. That's really high, even for a lightning shot. And look at how bright that sucker is. It was really a bright bolt of lightning. So even at a higher f-stop, you can actually still get pretty good lightning depending on your exposure rate and basically the amount of light coming off the bolt. All right. This was a 1 minute exposure at f22 with my ISO at 100. And again, accidental shot, but you can kind of see what happens. And again, it was another lesson learned. So I actually learned I can go longer in my exposure. I can play more with the foreground lighting and then maybe mix my lightning into it as well. You can also shoot in bulb mode. And again, this is exactly what I was doing. I was back at f22, but this time I actually had a neutral density filter on it, a very light one. I didn't really want to overcook the bridge. I was trying to do a really long bulb mode kind of shot. You can kind of see how I'm getting the bulb mode out of it. And then I got this nice little juicy piece of lightning that kind of kicked in there and kind of added to the image. And again, once I was playing with it in post, I kind of adjust it however I wanted. I wanted to highlight the lightning more than the bridge, so I knocked the bridge down some, brought the lightning up, and was actually able to play with the image some. But you can shoot in bulb mode just the same. Again, though, using that wired trigger makes it possible to where you can hold on to it without jiggling your camera around. So you can actually shoot in bulb mode. You don't have to be in automatic or anything like that. Shoot in bulb mode, make sure your f-stop's where you want it, make sure your ISO is where you want it, and you can shoot away and have some fun with it. Again, this is more about creating the art than it is just getting pictures of lightning, if that makes sense. So really create your art, have some fun with it, all right? And use different techniques and play with your techniques. The more you play with your techniques, the more that you actually do these different types of settings on your cameras, the more you'll find out what works, what doesn't work, and that's what creates the fun in photography. Once you get it all right and you start really learning what's going on, then you can start adjusting for things that are working out. You want to get your lighting for your lightning better, so you can work your foregrounds, your backgrounds, and all that. This is actually a culmination of all that practice, all right? So again, big storm, roughly about 5 miles off of the coast of Florida. Pretty tall sucker too. I mean, that storm was probably in the 50,000 foot range at the top of the storm, so you don't even see it in the top of the image. The bolt itself is absolutely massive, and It was a highly energetic, and this storm actually produced a number of these bolts here. There's actually a couple pictures. And then actually over the course of the few days, we had these storms that kept cycling along the coastline. And so I actually had a few days of these storms, and I got a whole bunch of really cool stuff in there. Once I got my exposures kind of where I wanted them, so I'm not overcooking my lightning, but I'm still getting my background. And then in the post process of editing, things was actually very simple. I didn't have to do a whole lot of editing to be able to get the shot because I had everything set up just right. On this particular image here, if I remember right, my f-stop was somewhere around 15-ish. And again, ISO was at 100. And the lens I was actually using was my Canon lens. And again, pulling that nice tack sharp focus. The one thing that you can't see is if you turned 90 degrees with the camera, you had the moon was actually just up there, and I actually used the moon to pull my focus off of. So I just literally pointed right up at the moon, got my focus, double checked it with a star, turned it right back around to the storm, and my focus was perfect the rest of the day. And again, I will double check my focus from time to time if I have that availability. So really keep working that focus as much as possible. And then you can, again, if you're using a super zoom lens, you can actually zoom in, zoom out. You can actually see what it is that you want to see.
Hey, Dave.
Yes, sir.
Do you shoot for your skyline? Another for
Do I do-
lightning? And then
Say
create
that
a-
one more time.
Sure. Do you shoot for your skyline? Another for
Yeah,
lightning? And then create a composite?
Sometimes. No, actually, I don't do composites along that. I tried it once, and it does actually. As a matter of fact, the picture that you used for the thing on Facebook, that was my one time when I tried that composite image thing, and I absolutely hated it. Again, though, that's me. I'm not a great editor. I don't get into the editing thing, and I don't do Photoshop. So that was my attempt at it, and I absolutely disliked it, and I've never used it again. So actually, the funny thing is, the part that you use the advertising for the whole thing was actually an image that I can't stand, which I just find hilarious myself. But again, that was actually something I was trying to shoot for. I wanted to try and get buildings in the shot, and I was trying to figure out how to do it. That was actually early in my lightning photography with a digital camera, and it was just a screw around shot. I was actually just trying to get as many bolts in, and I was going to edit it all together. It was crap. I didn't like it. But one of the things that does happen in doing lightning or any kind of long exposure where you're doing with flashing light, all right, the more the light flashes, the more you're going to have what's called a ghost image, all right? This is a great example of a ghost image. This shot was about a minute-long exposure, all right? It's actually two separate bolts of lightning captured in the same exposure pull, all right? So one bolt of lightning struck at one point in time, and then literally 30 seconds later, the other bolt of lightning struck. Now you'll notice right here in the clouds, you see that double cloud? That's because the storm has moved over, and I'm actually getting a strobing from the one lightning bolt, which lit up one cloud, and the strobing from the other lightning bolt got that same cloud, but the cloud scooted over, a few hundred yards or whatnot, and it actually gave me a ghost image. So sometimes going too long with your exposure, and you end up with these ghost clouds, all right? And so that is something that, again, if I really wanted to get serious with this and make this a really cool image, I could edit that out. I'm not going to get into all that. I don't mind seeing the ghost image because it's actually kind of cool. I got two bolts of lightning in one exposure, all right? That's actually part of the game, all right? So this is actually some of the stuff that you're going to see when you do lightning. And then, again, learning to play the exposure per the storm. Every storm is different. No two storms. One storm I worked had a lightning blast like literally every 10 seconds. I mean, it was just like one after another, after another, after another. And then some you might go 4 or 5 minutes between lightning blasts, and you have no idea what's coming next. So you just kind of got to play the numbers. So lightning shooting can actually be boring, and it can be very exciting at the same time. If you ever see some big crazy idiot jumping up and down on the Ringling Causeway, you're probably seeing me saying, I got it, I got it, I got it, because the amount of frustration that lightning brings. All right.
Jackie had a question. Most of your shots are wide angle. What range? 14 to 24? I'm assuming she's talking about 35 millimeter, full frame.
Millimeter wise, yeah. If I'm going really wide with it, I'm using 18 millimeters on a crop sensor. So it's 18 millimeters times 1.6. I think it ends up to be something like 37 millimeters, something like, I'm not groovy with math, but it does change your millimeters, but on average, I'm shooting anywhere from about 20 millimeter on up. I do have a lens that is actually a wide lens, and I can actually knock it down to about 10 millimeter and really go super wide and grab a giant sky picture. But again, if you're going to shoot a giant wide sky picture, you're going to be like really close to your subject matter to make it interesting. And in my book, that's too close to be with lightning. So honestly speaking, don't be afraid to go a little bit farther away. I had a guy tell me one time, oh, you can't shoot lightning using a zoom lens. That's just, you can't do it. It's just not enough. Everything you see here shot has been shot with a zoom lens. Everything I've shot was shot with a zoom lens. Now, because I'm not going to put myself inside of a storm cloud to where I can get electrocuted. So the farther off is actually a good thing.
Yeah, the question I think is, are you using a crop sensor system or using full frame?
I am using a crop sensor. And again, this is the other thing that I say when it comes to your f-stop and that kind of thing. Your exposure length and your ISO is a fixed set of numbers. ISO 100, bingo. If you have ISO 50 on your camera, knock your socks off and enjoy the 50. You can actually play with that equally as well. But your f-stop is actually what's going to get your exposure, as in underexposed or overexposed. If you're using a crop sensor, you are not getting as much light into the sensor. So your f-stop is actually going to be a little bit lower and or larger in size in order to get more light in. If you're using a full sensor frame camera, then your f-stop can actually get higher and or a smaller hole, so you can actually get a little bit less light in your lens. Again, you have to kind of adjust it out as per your camera and lens setup. This is one of the reasons why I can't sit here and say, use f-stop 11 with the exposure at such a, it literally, you can't do that, because every camera and lens combination is slightly different from each other, and the amount of light that you get in through your lens into your sensor is going to be different as per what your equipment is. You kind of have to learn what your f-stop is. It takes a little bit of experimentation once you learn the basic techniques. And then you start experimenting with what your exposures are, and you start learning the numbers and that kind of thing. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of frustration, but it's actually well worth it in the long run, because the more you do it, the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. Any other questions on that level? Anybody?
I think that was it.
All right.
I mean, cool. I'm double checking real quickly here. I would assume you would use this kind of similar style with fireworks. Even though fireworks are a lot more predictable, you can hear them go off before you see the explosion too.
The interesting part is it's not similar. It's exactly the same technique. And I mean, to the letter, the technique does not change. This is actually why the technique is so important to learn if you're going to do low light photography, because this technique is actually used for everything from fireworks, lightning, to as much as even something sitting still, or maybe shooting car light trails running down the road, or star trails. If you're shooting star trails, it's all the same technique. Your adjustments in your settings are maybe slightly different, but not that much. So you're still working in a manual mode. You're still working with the same kind of settings. The settings are really not that much different from each other. Really, it just basically, and this is what this frame that you're actually looking at, again, another piece of ribbon lightning, and then another piece. This is actually almost like ribbon lightning, but it's literally the same type of technique, just so you can get interesting subject matter. And you can actually play with this technique using all different types of photography. So fireworks, absolutely. Shoot your stuff crazy with fireworks, because it's actually the same kind of thing that's going on. Any other questions? All right, let's go ahead and move on. The other thing is, and I always tell people is don't be afraid to zoom in, all right? If you find an area that's what I call a hot spot where you see a lot of activity, go ahead and zoom into it. Get you just a little bit more stuff going on. Again, and then try and figure out where you're, now, if you're shooting at night, here's the toughest part, all right? You can't see the clouds because everything's black. If you're lucky enough to have the moon, you might be able to see a little bit of a little bit of shadows, that kind of thing. It takes a little bit of figuring out what's what, that kind of thing. If you underexpose, you can actually bring your images back in your post editing and actually bring a little bit of light to them just on simply how you expose or add white light or get rid of your darks, get that kind of thing. So there's things that you can do in post editing that can help fix an image to where you can see a little bit more of your clouds and that kind of thing. When you're actually shooting, you might not have any idea what kind of clouds you're actually shooting at. So don't be afraid to zoom in, but at the same time, when you do, you want to double check your f-stop and make sure that you're not overcooking your images. All right, so again, this is all about artwork, all right? And again, playing with your images, it takes a lot of just playing and goofing around and figuring things out as to what you want to see. And that's really what this is all about. I never claimed to be a great lightning photographer. I'm just very interested in lightning. I'm very interested in the physics of it. But really, I just like to make the artwork and just see what I can create. That's all I'm ever trying to do, is just see what I can create. So literally, different types of lightning, different types of storm, different types of images, and then my post creates different things as well. And again, sometimes it might be just accidental. I actually had a big heavy cloud layer. I didn't see any lightning the whole time I was out. And so I decided I wanted to get this shadow of the tree and all that. And then out of nowhere, it starts lightning. I was like, well, what the heck? Let's use it and add it into the image. So basically, I just waited for the lightning, did some long exposures, got this really cool kind of tree thing. This is at Island Park, or excuse me, City Island, when that old half-dead tree used to sit out there at the very end. That's gone now, but unfortunately. But again, I was just trying to create something a little bit more artistic. So your composition does kind of drive what it is that you're trying to create. And then you can add the lightning in, literally if it's going on. So just utilize what was going on around me. All right. And again, background, foreground, doesn't matter. This is the same kind of thing. Horrible lightning storm. The lightning storm was really, and I don't mean horrible in the aspects of it was really bad. It sucked. I just was not enjoying the lightning storm at all. So I was getting bored and I was like, okay, let's zoom in. Let's play with the foreground. Let's play with the clouds some. I could see just enough to where I could create some stuff. And I just got some basic shots just to play with. Are they masterpieces? Nah. But it is just something a little bit different. And sometimes you get bored, but I'm just utilizing the foreground and all that kind of stuff. The other thing is too is depth of field. This is one of those images you were asking about, shooting the buildings and then adding the Photoshop. Yes, you could totally do that, and I'm not against it. Again, you're creating art, so if that's something you want to do, create a composite image. No big deal. Who cares? I like composite images just as much as I do straight shots. But again, I was experimenting. I knew I had the storm off in the background. I could see it on the radar. I knew there was some lightning in it. It was tough to get because there was so much humidity in the air. You can kind of see how it's a little fuzzy. That isn't because I don't know how to focus. That's because of the humidity in the air physically was so thick that it was actually creating my lightning was a little more fuzzy. So what I did is I decided to shoot the buildings, put the lightning slightly out of focus, and I created this kind of depth of field image. All right. And again, just playing with the lens, create something new. I took a bad situation, try to turn it into something a little bit more fun. All right. So again, here in Florida, humidity is really the hardest thing that we're fighting all the time, because humidity really takes your image and distorts things. And even lightning, it will distort lightning, make things fuzzy. You might have pulled the most tack sharp image possible, and still the humidity in the air can actually cause a fuzzy situation. This is one of those fuzzy situations. I had a beautiful tack sharp setup, and the humidity was actually so tight. And again, this is the same kind of thing. It was a different night, but I was in the same area. I was still looking at the same thing, and I was still a crappy storm. I was like, yeah, what the heck? But the humidity was so bad, I just couldn't pull a decent shot. It just was not there. But the composition wise, of course, we're trying to maintain rules of thirds, maintaining our composition, all that kind of stuff. Again, not a great image, but just a good example of things that you can play around with and enjoy in your creation. The only downside to doing any kind of long exposure at all is, of course, moving objects. You have to kind of keep an eye out for them. Unfortunately, airplanes cause a lot of problems, and boats. And you are looking at a boat traveling through my scene while I was getting this beautiful piece of horseshoe lightning. This is actually two separate bolts, but they happened exactly at the same time. And I got this really kind of archway kind of thing, but then I had a boat come in there and screw it up. Yes, I can fix this in post. No, did I fix it in post? No, because honestly, the image wasn't that interesting to me. But it does give you an idea of what's going on when you're talking about moving objects and that kind of thing. Airplanes are the worst. Believe it or not, satellites also cause problems. You'll see little streaks in your images. You're like, oh, another satellite, especially if you're shooting at twilight. When I was talking about you're overexposing, this is what I'm talking about with hot spots. Again, when you overexpose, it doesn't matter what settings you use, you cannot at any point readjust your image and get rid of that hot spot. It's physically not possible. Once you overcook it, you overcook it. So really focus on trying to underexpose versus overexpose. Throw it away. Again, underexposed, you're looking at the raw image. And again, kapow, magically, I add a little color to it just by changing my tint values and whatnot. I didn't do anything else crazy. And again, this is just for example. Excuse me. I did this just for example to show you what you can do and play with it. But literally underexposing your bolt, you get rid of the hot spots, and then you don't have to deal with the hot spots. And then you can brighten the image up. You can use your exposure. You can use all the different tools to enhance your clouds, that kind of thing. So don't be afraid to underexpose if it's getting rid of those hot spots. Also, when I talk about humidity of the air, all right, this image here had a lot of humidity in the air, and just by screwing around the color, you can actually see the aura of the actual humidity getting lit up by the electricity. So when you see this, a bolt of lightning is literally thinner than a pencil lead. It's very, very thin. Even though it's super high energy, the thickness of it is very thin. What you're actually seeing in a lightning bolt is not the electricity. You are seeing the moisture in the air actually dissipating the light energy from the electricity. So when you actually look at a bolt of lightning, you're not actually seeing the bolt. You are actually seeing just the diffused light in the humidity of the air. That gives you any idea picture-wise what's going on with your picture. The other thing I can say is have patience. Patience is the absolute virtue with lightning photography. It is 100% an act of frustration, and it's got to be one of the most frustrating things I've ever done. But at the same time, it's also one of the more fun things I've ever done because it's frustrating. It's tough. Not everybody does it good. Not everybody, has as much fun. It's up to you to create the fun and just use a lot of patience with it and just work with it. Again, nice big giant sky crawler. I love sky crawlers, especially when you're in a cloud situation where you don't have anything else interesting. Sky crawlers can have a little bit of fun. And you can do all kinds of stuff with sky crawlers. This is a big wide shot, but I could actually take it and zoom it in and use it as a background. I could use all kinds of stuff with sky crawlers. So that's one of those types of lightning bolts where you can actually kind of play with it. So if you're in a time when you see sky crawlers, go for it. The other thing is, again, just do the artwork. I mean, this is all about art. So you just create art. I was just goofing around. got this one here. This one right here on the right-hand side, I actually call this God taking a walk because, well, I just say God, but it could be whatever you want to call it. But it looks like some dude taking a walk with a, really groovy kind of thing going on. So again, just create the art, have fun with the art. That's really what this whole thing about. Once you get it to a certain point, even if your storm is not that interesting, make it interesting. Use your foreground, your backgrounds, your objects in it, your buildings, your bridges, your cloud masses, trees. I mean, there's all these different elements. The lightning was not spectacular. It was all hidden inside this giant cloud mass, and the cloud mass was not great, and I wasn't getting super lightning. But man, it lit up the cloud nice and cool, and it gave me this beautiful image. And I was actually able to play with the image a little bit and take just a nice long exposure shot and get some cool stuff, even though the lightning wasn't spectacular. So again, take a bad situation and make it a little bit better. You can utilize sunsets if you are shooting in the daytime, and you can totally shoot lightning in the daytime, but you do need to use a neutral density filter. And this is where the lightning bug trigger comes into play, because you're not shooting as long of an exposure. So your exposure time, because you got more ambient light around you, you need to knock your exposure time down. So literally, I'm using my lightning bug. I've got a neutral density filter, and my exposure time is like 2 seconds. So really quick exposure time. And then I'm just trying to f-stop my image to not overproduce it. Your lightning is going to be a little bit dimmer. You can adjust it a little bit in post, but it's still going to show dimmer because the neutral density filter will knock out the lightning in comparison to the sun in the background or even in the foreground. But again, you can play with it some and kind of make an interesting picture out of something that might not have been as interesting. So again, a simple piece of negative lightning, and now I have an interesting shot because I've used my clouds, the sunset, the foreground, background. See all these different little elements. And again, neutral density filter really does have play a part with it. So if you get that super zoom lens for doing just lightning photography, get a neutral density filter set along with it so you can actually shoot in the daytime, that kind of thing. And again, a lightning trigger, if you do want to actually get like a lightning trigger, you can get those, and you can use those more for your daytime type shooting. All right.
Hey,
Again,
Dave,
yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry. Which neutral density filter are you using? What stop are you using?
I wish I remember the actual numbers on it. Was it a 2, one of the 2, 5, and 10 or 15 something? I forget what the actual numbers were. There, I got a 3 set, so I got basically a light, medium, and a dark. I wish I remembered the actual numbers of the neutral density filters. I honestly don't. I apologize, but again, if you look online, you can get different. And I actually got a 3-pack of neutral density filters, so I could stack them if I needed to stack them. And I did do one shot where that last shot that I showed you using the neutral density filter was 2 of them stacked. I used my 2 darker ones to actually stack it because there was just so much ambient light around me. I had to do something to knock the light out of it. So I used a neutral density filter for that. The image on the left-hand side is also a neutral density filter on that. Again, you can see there's a lot of ambient light, and it was actually a little bit darker. It was right at that twilight time when the sun has already gone down. I got a lot of backscatter light going on behind the storm. And so again, that was actually a little bit lighter neutral density filter just so it wouldn't overcook the image while I'm doing a longer exposure, if that makes sense. And again, use your clouds to help your image, that kind of thing. And then also understand the sizes and differences. Let's just give you an idea of the size of this bolt, all right? This is about 25,000 feet roughly that you're looking at the top of the cloud, all right? That's not the highest a cloud can get. Clouds get into the 40,000 foot range. So we're talking about a moderate piece of high energy bolt here, all right? This is the 12,000 foot range. This is where you would skydive from if you're into skydiving. And basically anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 foot is where your beaver tail is going to come out from the cloud. This is what they call the outflow of the cloud, all right? And then this space right here is literally about 1,000 to 1,500 feet. So if this kind of gives you, if you were in underneath this thing, yes, you get some really cool lightning right there under the beaver tail, but also you would be very much in striking distance of getting electrocuted. So get a little bit farther away from the storm, let it be farther away from you, and actually get the whole giant bolt instead of just that little itty bitty piece of electric there. And again, just have fun. Play with your foreground, background. Again, I literally was goofing around. I was bored to tears that night. I was just like, oh, and then the storm came out of nowhere, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll get some shots of it. And then I again had to run for cover because it came up on me really fast, and I was like, oops, left myself out hanging. So I had to go duck underneath the bridge again. But again, just have some fun with the art and that kind of thing. All right, again, oh, actually, I doubled that picture up. You guys have already seen that picture. All right, so again, just looking at storms using the Gulf of Mexico. When we do have these cyclic storms, they usually tend either at the early morning hours and or the late evening hours. You'll get these storms that run up and down the coast when we're in the cyclic weather pattern. And literally they run about 5 miles off the coast, 5 to 10 miles off the coast, and you get these really cool images. So I tend to take a look at my radar at nighttime and or in the really early morning time to see if we got storms running up and down the coast. If we do, I run out to the beach, I set up my camera, and I get these shots. This is actually kind of the fun time because this is where the storms are flanking across, and you can get these nice flanking shots of the lightning. All right. And again, this is all from, I think actually some of these are from the morning time and some of these are from the evening time. It does vary from time to time. This was definitely an evening one here. I had the moon that was actually backlighting the clouds. The moon was up, well, actually, you can see the moon was up a little bit higher right about the upper left-hand corner. And again, stars, I had tons of stars, so I was actually taking my focus off that. And I was getting some really cool lightning shots. And this is actually that same night. I just took some different variations, adding different elements, taking different elements away, that kind of thing, all right? Different night or morning. I'm not even sure when I took this one. Same kind of thing though, just playing with it. Actually, I overcooked this one just a little bit, and you can see it because the light turns purple in the edit. And again, there's nothing I can do about it. Yes, I could take the red out of it, but I kind of liked it at the time. I actually changed this edit and re-edited this shot a while back. I forgot what I did with it. Again, different types of things, and my goal over time is to try and get as many bolts into one exposure that I can get. So this is a single exposure, 3 separate lightning bolts all at one time. This is about a minute exposure here. And what was really interesting without this is I did not get the ghosting of the cloud. So the cloud was not moving a whole heck of a lot. And I was actually very surprised by that when I did edit this shot. That I wasn't getting the ghosting because these are different blasts. This is probably my funnest blast right here. This is actually 3 separate exposures inside of about a 3-minute period of time. And these were absolutely monster bolts. I can't say how high energy. It was so high energy that one of the blasts that I got actually created particles on one of my images, and I do believe that I've actually sent it off to have it researched, but I do think I was getting some what they call gamma ray burst off of one of the bolts of lightning. These things were absolutely massive. The storm was about 4 or 5 miles offshore, and I set the camera up. I got my focus pulled tack sharp. I had the moon and the stars literally up to the upper left-hand side of the screen. So I pulled my focus, went back to the thing, opened it up, gave it a little bit of space. And then I did a series of exposures, and each exposure was about 30 plus seconds. And then literally I got blast after blast after blast, and literally just through the, so this is the one composite picture that I actually got, but it's all within less than 3 minutes of each other. And monstrous blasts. And I mean, they were huge. And again, you can even see that the storm was a little bit higher in elevation, but even underside, the amount of forking in the lightning and everything. So we're talking about a lot of voltage in this. And actually, I've had a few people very interested in this scientifically because of the things that I was able to capture with it. And again, this is yet another one with Sarasota in the background. Again, just a lucky shot. I always like to say all my lightning stuff is just lucky shots because you have no idea what's going to happen. You're there just to capture the moment, and whatever happens, happens. If you get it, you get it. If you don't get it, try again until you get it. That's basically how you have to look at it. And then search for it, all right? Go through your images and actually search for it. This is actually a little Valentine's one I use every year because the lightning made a nice, cute little heart. So whenever I send out the old Valentine's, everybody have a happy Valentine. I like to use this one so they get the little electric heart thing. Goofy. Anybody have any questions overall? This is kind of the end of the whole thing for the most part. And so I kind of like to go over any last minute questions you guys have about exposures or anything like that. Yes, no, maybe. All right.
Yeah, you might want to stop sharing the screen because there's people popping up with on the chat thing.
Oh, okay. Let's see here. What do we got here? All right. So, I got a couple ones here. What are MYOPs? MYOP is actually a type of trigger device. I actually have a MYOP trigger, and it's not all that exciting. I'm not 100% sure I like MYOPs. They don't not work. I'm not saying that they don't work. For lightning, it's not as exciting. For other types of photography, you can do a lot of stuff with MYOPs. They're really cool on that part. For lightning,
I was going to say the MYOPs because JPI carries the MYOPs. So basically, you could use the Smart Plus triggers to capture your lightning. But however, as Dave says, they're not 100% perfect, but no trigger is anyway. But the idea is that it's really geared towards strobe photography, things like that.
Right. The type of trigger is actually important when you're dealing with lightning. Lightning triggers are a little bit different than light sensitive triggers.
Right.
A MYOP is a light sensitive trigger. A lightning bug is not a light sensitive trigger. It is actually a radiation trigger. It actually detects X-rays because X-rays fires slightly before the light traveling from a bolt of electricity. And so it picks up those X-rays and other parts of radiation, and that actually fires the trigger. So it will actually fire before the lightning is physically visible. A MYOP cannot do that. A MYOP is only light emitting. So you have to, if you're looking at a trigger and you want to use a trigger, and again, triggers are cool. I have no problems with triggers whatsoever, but you have to do your research as the type of trigger and what you're going to use the trigger for. So a lightning trigger is a specific type of trigger that's actually looking for elements in the lightning versus just using light by itself.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, because by that time the light strikes, it's pretty much gone at that point.
Exactly. And that's kind of one of the problems is lightning fires sometimes so fast that if you're just using a light trigger, you'll never get it in time, regardless of how much you're doing your settings.
Right, before anybody has any other questions, I just want to make sure, because we're getting close to 2 hours here. So I just want to make sure everyone's still wanting to keep on. I do have a little bit to go over here at the end, but I understand it's 2 hours. And if you guys have to get going.
I told you I can talk.
It's okay, man. No, because everyone really likes the presentation so far. Everyone's been doing this likes it so far. But I'll wait. And again,
I was going to say as well, if you guys have any extra questions as well, again, feel free to ask Donovan, or if you want to ask him and he can reach out to me, I can get you an answer back. If he doesn't know it, just ask. It's never a problem at all. I really am here for you guys just to have fun with your photography. So,
and you're also in the low light photo group on FaceBag, right?
Yes. Yeah. You can actually hit it in Facebook if you're in the low light group and actually send me a shout out. Just put out there for David Lee or Uncle Snaff, and I'll get it and be like, oh, somebody wants to talk to me.
Well, I always like talking to you, Daddy.
I like talking to people.
All right, so it's up to you guys. I know if you guys want to hang around for another 15 minutes, I'll finish up here. So we're going to start off with Mr. Greg Adams, if you're still around. So these are some of Greg Adams' photos that he shot. And if I remember correctly, this was out in Borrego Springs, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if Greg's around. He's still around, Greg? I can't see my chat window when I'm
Yeah,
doing
there
this.
he is. I see him.
Okay. So yeah, and if I remember correctly, these were shot out there. He showed something similar like this last time, and I was really taken aback by some of the photos of it, and I'm really tickled pink that he brought some more out for the review. Again, this is a great representation of star trails as the light kind of travels as you're looking towards the north. And it looks like he did a little bit of light painting here with the metal dragon, and I really enjoy seeing Greg's stuff. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
Anybody have
The
any?
dragon is about 12 feet tall and 330 feet long.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So you're just seeing the head that disappears underground and then comes back up, goes back down, comes back up, goes under a road, and then appears again.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. I really like it a lot. This is, I'm assuming, in the same spot as well, too, because I know they have a couple of statues out there, right?
There's 130.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
This scorpion is about 12 feet tall and about 20 feet long. These are all metal sculptures out in the middle of the desert and completely open for anyone to visit. And there's no cost to it, of course. And it was just sponsored by someone locally there that had a lot of money and nothing else to spend it on, and created all these statues.
Which state was this in again? I forget.
It's in California. It's about
California.
2 hours south of Palm Springs.
Yeah, I think somebody said they were going to Utah, so I was like trying to remember where it was again.
No, California.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, you got some great stuff here, and I love this photo. It's just it's and not only is the kind of comical with the Jeep, but I just love the star trails behind it. It just really adds more to what you get, that sense of the confusion with the driver as they was probably trying to get over this mountaintop or this rock pile. That's really cool.
This sculpture is completely steel, but the hair, sunglasses, the ball cap, the wheels, the mud on the wheels are all steel.
Wow.
It's really incredible to see these things.
Yeah. That looks really cool, man. Anybody else? No? All right. All right, I'm going to jump into, here we go. Where's it at? Greg, thank you so much for sharing those photos. Again, I really love your work, and I appreciate you sharing that stuff. Thank you again.
Well, thanks, Don. I appreciate it.
Yeah, very cool.
All right, so I'm going to jump into, oops, I didn't get the chance to see what it was. This is by Eugenio Morales. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah. Well, you're close enough.
Oh, close enough. Yeah, I won't even I won't even try my bad accent. So this is really cool. Again, now you're in Kissimmee, right?
Yeah, that's correct. This particular picture was in Orlando, in their park.
Yeah, Lake Eola.
No, it's way in downtown. I can't remember the name right now.
Oh yeah, that's the one that's down there in center downtown.
Right.
I've seen it once before. I knew it looked familiar, but yeah, that's the one that's down there in the center downtown area.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the park.
They always have an interesting light display around at least most of the time they do anyway. But yeah, this is really cool. I love the long exposure of this thing and the shooting up over there. Did you get any tighter shots, or is this about as much as you can zoom in on it?
Yeah, that's as much as could focus on it.
And this was what about a 20-second exposure or something like that?
I can't remember right now because I did that one some time back, a few months back.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I think the aperture was 1.6 or something like that. I can't remember right now, but I know the ISO was 100.
Right.
That I can sure because I always use 100 for night.
Right. Well, again, I really I love this. I love this, especially got the color in there. You know, I would think if you can next time is just get a little bit tighter around there because the building over there is, for me anyway, I don't know about Dave or anybody else, that one's kind of distracting to me. But what I also really love is the fact that, you know, you get those little star effects, which you get through with the aperture of the lens, which is really, really cool. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
That thing always
Yeah.
tickles me out.
Yeah, Dono. I had a question for Eugenio. It cannot be 1.6 to get those stars. The aperture had to be above f11 minimum.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right on that one. It's just I can't remember the exact aperture I use because I play a lot with the aperture. I don't
Right.
play much with the time, but the aperture definitely and the ISO.
Yeah, it's probably closer like f16, 20 seconds, something like that. But it's
Yeah,
really
it's
good.
definitely a higher one.
Yeah.
And actually, those little itty bitty lines that you see, that's actually created the smaller your aperture, because they use blades, overlapping blades. Those lines are actually created from where those blades actually overlap each other. So that actually is showing the inner blades to your aperture system on your camera. And that's where those star images come from because it changes the focal length inside of the actual lens itself. Sharpens it up right there at the aperture.
Yeah, I really again, like I said, this is you got some good stuff here.
That's a fun effect. I love that
yeah,
effect.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's go on to the next one. And now where is this one? I don't recognize this part. I think it's Orlando again, isn't it?
That is actually Universal Studios.
Oh, okay.
That's the hallway that goes right into the entrance for Universal Studios.
Okay. Were you handheld on this stuff, or are you trying to shoot through a window or something like that?
Yeah, I was handheld in that one.
Right.
I was with my nieces. We were in the park. And I was like, oh my God, that looks really cool. And I tried to take it from my hands. I didn't have tripod or nothing with me at that point.
Yeah, it's always hard to do that, especially for these long exposures. I've gotten lucky a couple of times where not necessarily when I'm moving, but I did long exposures. But the trick is you got to be able to balance the camera and hope it doesn't fall. With you get the self timer going, and you find some place to set it. And then what you do is once you get the self timer, then you have to give yourself time on the self timer so the camera stops shaking after you hit the trigger. So you got to have at least 10 seconds on the shutter before you can keep on going. I had a camera balanced right on the balcony one time at the edge of the balcony, and I have to hit the shutter, and if I hit it too hard, it goes over. But yeah, you got some interesting motion blur inside that stuff. I think, but I think the sky, I think is probably where my eye gets drawn to the most. I really love that. I think that works out more. I think that works out really well. You got a nice gradation between for the transition between the blue hour and the golden hour right there.
That's what I actually was trying to get mostly, the sky, but I can't include the bridge because I thought it will give some elements to it.
Right. Yeah. But that's really cool. All right. Let's go into the next one here. And all right. Oh, great. You got the big ball of radiation in the sky. I love that part. So I love this. This is an interesting photo. I was looking at it earlier. And again, I think I love the fact that you framed it in really nicely right here. I still think it needs to be a little bit closer. I can't do it here on the thing, but I think this might work better as a vertical than as a horizontal. But everyone's going to have their own opinion. But I love the colors in the sky. I love the fact that the tower juts right out in there. and with the dichotomy of the sun just pouring the light out. It's just really nice.
None of those pictures are edited. They're as I took them.
Right.
Exactly. This particular one, I did it with a focal length of 5.6.
Right.
The was 1 and 1250 with a 55 millimeter at 100 ISO.
Cool. Again, I just love the colors you got with the sky. That's just that works out really well. Again, it's always nice to see the transition from the different times when the sun's starting to set. You still get a little bit of the blue, and then you got a little bit of the gold just blending in together. It's really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, Dono. Also the lines. You have the sun in that corner with the arch made by the tree, continuing by the clouds, and then coming back the other way below. You know, kind of making that oblong window in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot. Right. I think maybe it needs to be just crop off the right. I think you got a winner there, but I really love that one. All right. All right, Dave, you still around, Dave? Mr. Dave McDonald. Playing around with your Z7. Oh, this is really, really cool. Are you still around? Are you still around, Mr. Dave? Oh, there you are. I'm not sure. Were you able to get your audio working?
How's that?
Okay, that's good. Again, I really love your stuff, Dave. You know, and just it's a gorgeous transition with the sun set and the blue sky, and of course, you got that nice little water feature there in the front. It really works out really well. I love that composition too with the silhouette of tree just digging into the blue. That works out really, really well.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. With this, I was experimenting with a reverse graduated for
Right.
The sunrise. So the darker part of the graduated filter is right at skyline at the horizon.
Okay.
And it gets light as you go up. So that's Jekyll Island. You know, it's a pretty famous tree.
That's
I
cool.
think they actually Jekyll Island was actually used in the Walking Dead, I think, last year.
Was it really?
The beach scene, you'll recognize the trees.
Where's Jekyll Island?
Georgia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is again, like I said, I really like this composition. It's nicely balanced out. But again, you've got a great eye for this stuff, and yeah, in the reverse filter. Now we're using you were shooting this 14 millimeters, so you had the tulip lens. Is that right?
No, I was an f4.
Oh, so okay.
So,
But you still did you use the drop leaf system, or did you use?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
it was a wine country camera filter holder.
Right.
And you drop it in. It was 100 millimeter by 150 millimeter, and then you just line the horizon right over where you anticipate the sun to be.
Oh, I see. Driftwood Beach. Got it.
Yeah. It's a real cool place, and it's worth the trip, and it's not really that far. I've tried to do Milky Way photography there, but weather really didn't work out for it when I tried.
So where was this one at?
So this Jump Off Rock by my North Carolina house. It was the one time last year I actually lined up with, it wasn't raining when the Milky Way was up. So that was a series of shots, and then I used that Starry Landscape software to line up the stars, and then I put a longer exposure over some of, not all of the foreground, and I just kind of, used the eraser tool and let some of the longer exposure come through for the foreground.
Right.
That's over by Asheville, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I recognize the mountain line.
Oh, okay.
I lived there for 15 years, so yeah, I've been around there.
Again, I love that. You got some nice definition of the core in there that works out really well. And for those of you who have photographed the Milky Way, they typically call this the horse part of the core because you see a little bit of the legs and a little bit of the eye and the nose and stuff. But that's not, the core is just a little bit below where these clouds are. So it's kind of getting washed out there. But again, it's an excellent definition out there. That's really, really cool. I'm jealous of those dark skies you get to play with. That's really nice.
No, it should be mentioned that if the horse is to the right, the picture was taken from the northern hemisphere. If it is to the left, it's from the southern hemisphere.
Right.
If you guys are ever in that North Carolina area too, granted, you have to use a little bit more composite photography because unfortunately light pollution does come into play. But the mountains are fantastic at hiding some of that light pollution, and the air can get really dry, especially in the wintertime. So that's a great place to get your star shots.
Okay, that's good to know.
Okay, so where was this one at? This is Tampa, or is this?
So this is in Miami.
Okay.
On top of the parking garage where the Whole Foods is in the compressor area. You have to kind of like climb over a fence and you get a nice view from up there.
I like that.
It's Port of Miami down there. I can see it. Yeah.
Well, again, this is a really great composition. Nice leading lines leading you through the whole thing. Again, I always love these little stars that pop up. It just tickles me. I just think that's the neatest thing that you can create with the aperture. And it always looks really cool when you get to see that stuff. And, it's just, part of the neat thing about optics, it just really works out really well.
And it's not overcooked either. That's the other thing. It's actually got a good exposure rate to it.
Yeah.
It was a fun picture to take because it's so beautiful there looking at the cityscape. It was actually the Total Wine, not the Whole Foods.
Right.
So the whole thing was fun. A lot of fun taking it.
Cool. I love that, man. That's really good. Let's see who's next up in this. All right. Again, Dave, thank you very much for sharing. I really appreciate it. And thanks again, man. You got some great stuff, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for hosting.
No, not a problem. All right. So I think this was, let me get back over there. This is Greg. You still around?
Yeah. This is the only one I was able to load on the Meetup photo storage there. That's why I had to send those photos to you, and I just tried and stuck one photo in there. That's from the National Cathedral in DC.
I love that. I love the special.
Cool.
It's a nice little composition with the piece, the cross, and I'm assuming that's the moon. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, that works out really, really well. It's a nice little lot of symbolism in all this stuff. That works out really well. Let's see, anybody else we got in here? Oops, gonna move the window here. We got one more here, and I think this is Paul. Paul, this is really cool. I saw this earlier. That's a nice picture of the moon there. Now, what did you shoot that with, Paul? Did you shoot that halfway through during the eclipse? That said, so that's really, really cool. And again, I love the definition that you're able to pull off. I don't know if Paul's still around. I haven't seen him in here yet. Is he still here? Anybody see him? Oh.
Don't know. That has to be at least 1,200 millimeters. I've shown it at 800, and I cannot pull that definition.
Well, I was wondering if he tracked it or something like that, and he kind of layered it up, because you can get some better definitions if you can track and stack them. So, but I love some of the extra bit of right here. That's really nice.
Wow, it's fantastic.
Yeah,
I've never seen that kind of texture before.
Yeah, well, I think there's a little bit of motion blur in there between this layering right here, but I could be. Yeah.
Actually, if you go into, because I have been playing with some photos I share with Dono, today of the eclipse. If you go into your moonshot, right? And let's say that you have a decent quality moonshot. You go in Lightroom and you increase the texture, you get some of that kind of texture of the moon. But granted, that focal length is fantastic.
Yeah, I know. You can see a little bit where the lens is kind of like having a hard time resolving right there. But, that's, what are you going to do? I mean, it's too far away. You're digging through atmosphere, that's really cool. So this is some of the shots that I did of the moon. I know this is I cropped into it. This was shot with the Olympus 75 to 300. And basically I was just trying to do like a little time lapse of as the Earth's shadow rolled over the moon. One of the things with the eclipse, it's not that you can't shoot both the dark and the light, but the problem is the light is so bright. If you expose for the bright side, you're gonna not get to the dark. If you can do both, if you want to, but the issue is that then you're going to get something that looks like a little bit like this, which can be, again, a little bit of fun. And I did run this through post a little bit just to dial down the glare from the bright side of the moon. But you can see the stars are still starting to pop up a little bit right there, a little bit of motion blur in there. Here, the totality was almost completely covered up right here. It was almost the full totality. You get that little bit of the glare of the light right there. And I always like that. It always reminds me of the inside of a human eyeball. And I always like that type of stuff. And you can see, again, the stars are pretty sharp overall. That works out well. So now I'm in full totality. This my focus got kind of wonky there on this particular shot, because you can see the stars are a little bit soft. It's not motion blur as much as it is dealing with that. Now, I was following the Mr. Eclipse thing for most of this stuff. So these were starting out about 1,000th of a second at 800 around f16 for these as I was shooting this type of stuff. And then after that, I started slowing down, playing around with the shutter a little bit. Again, I think this was about a second or two for this one. This one was, again, roughly about 1.2 seconds. And then we're getting to about 1.4 seconds or so in this particular shot. But again, I kept the moon, the bastard kept moving through my shot, as it drifts through the sky. The
Earth is a total bastard.
I know.
No question
the Earth turns, 15 degrees every hour, and the moon's moving, through your sky. It's like, but I think this was probably my best totality one that I got, and you can see the stars and everything else. And I think that worked out really, really well. And then when I went to I also did 2 shots of composite where I layered a 10-second shot with the totality of the moon on top of that after that, which again is what I really, really like doing, that type of stuff. It was really kind of cool. As I mentioned before, Mr. Eclipse has some good stuff that you can check out. Again, I would recommend it. The way you read his chart is that basically I was shooting around at, I'm going to move a little thing here. Hang on a second. So to kind of give you an idea, I'm shooting with a lens that I can't get below 6.1 on there at 300 millimeters. So, and I want to bracket some of my shots when I'm doing some of this stuff. So I was shooting everything around f16, around 800. And then what I did was then I could then start at 1000 and start, as the eclipse gets more into it, you can start slowing down the shutter speed. And when I got to the totality, I'm getting down towards around this time right here. So again, it's a little bit more of a fun thing to kind of play around with. You can see how the chart kind of works, this little guide works. It works out really well. And again, you can have a little bit of fun with that. So I'll take a look at these edits that I did a little bit. This is again working with that composite of dealing with Star Trail. and with the moon. So this was a 10-second shot right here. So I wanted to get a little bit of motion blur within the star field. So I did that, but then I thought the moon was kind of small. So what I did was then of course I just blew the moon up because I wanted to see it bigger on there, because again, I was shooting this with a wide field. It's wider what my lens was, which is like 150 millimeters. So I can get a little bit more stars in there. And I knew I was going to blow the moon up in that particular thing. And then for fun, what I did was I did a little bit of cropping, make it a little bit tighter and stuff like that. And I was really, really happy with the results on that type of thing. I also went a little bit further too, is I based on our last talk about the star trails, where you could basically rotate your star field a little bit each time and then combine them together. And you can get a little bit more of an exciting star trail type of effect, which again, I was really, really happy with that. I posted this one and somebody on Facebook loved it so much they wanted they ordered a print for me on that particular thing. Yeah, it's on the thing. So I think we pretty much covered everything that I wanted to go over with everybody here. We went through the review. I think we're pretty much caught up. Like I said, we ran a little bit over today, so I think.
Sorry, guys, my bad.
That's all right, man. I think that's why I'm sure they preferred your presentations, because they probably learned more from you tonight than they probably did from me. But again, I got to thank David for putting the presentation together. I really enjoy it. I hope the people who requested it got some good tips and hints about the whole thing. And I really appreciate you guys sticking around towards the end. As you can hear, my voice is getting kind of ragged here. So I'm pretty much, I think I'm spent out for the rest of the night. Thank you all very much. And you guys have a great night. And I'll see you out there somewhere in the dark. Again, I can't thank you enough for the patience for you guys tonight. Now we're running about 2.5 hours. So thank you everyone who submitted their photos. I really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. Please, by all means, post on the Facebook, upload your photos to the meetup if you want to share. Thanks again, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. And guys, have fun making art out there.
Yep.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Good night, Good.
Good night, guys.